the 71st lecture of the Otaru University of Commerce English Lecture Series. Today we welcome Mr. Theodore Diehl, and he is from the U.S. Consulate in Sapporo. You are the Public Affairs Officer?
Public Affairs Officer.
Public Affairs Officer. And he will be speaking to us today about women in the workforce. Please welcome Mr. Theodore Diehl.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Thank you, Sean, for the introduction. It's good to be here. My name is Diehl. I'm Public Affairs Officer at the U.S. Consulate General in Sapporo. And I've been in Sapporo for 14 to 15 months. So this is my second winter. I really love Sapporo. Before Sapporo, I was in Vietnam. Vietnam is always hot. We're welcoming the winter and the snow. Love to enjoy the weather and the snow, the activities that are here in Hokkaido. How many international students do we have here? Can you raise your hand? Exchange students? Anyone from the United States?
No.
No. Okay. Well, I'm going to talk about women in the workforce. It's an official title. Probably scared away a lot of guys from coming, thinking, wow, this is not really interesting or it's not relative to me. But I probably should have changed the title to Women in the Workforce, maybe a 21st century Japanese workforce, right? Or the workplace in Japan and you or something. Everyone's interested in jobs. Kind of my message here is the workplace in Japan is changing and it's going to change more quickly. The United States is experiencing a lot of these changes. I think we're a little bit ahead of Japan in the curve that affect women, minorities, all minorities really. But technology is also changing the workplace, the types of jobs and how people work. And yeah, you guys are at an age where you're going to graduate pretty soon from university. You're going to get a job. Has anyone already started in Shukatsu? Just one, all right. One person looking for a job? Yeah. It's scary. I bet some of you are kind of worried, like, what am I going to do when I graduate from college? I know when I graduated from college, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I ended up becoming a teacher, and I taught at high school for a while. I taught at university for a while. I taught in Japan, and I taught in the United States. Actually, I taught in Austria also. I did that before I joined the Foreign Service, so I like talking to younger audiences. But I want to make sure this is relevant for you. Originally, I made kind of a formal speech. This is not a formal environment. What is this room called? The interactive?
Active learning.
Active learning. Okay. So when I was a teacher, a professor, I wanted interaction with my students. When I'd ask questions, I would always welcome people to raise their hand and stop and say, hey, wait, can you clarify that? So please feel free. I know it's pretty different from Japanese teaching style. But let's give it a try. Where's Amy? Amy Yamada actually wrote an essay on this topic, and I should probably have her up here with me to talk about it. The consulate sponsored an essay contest, and Planky Sensei, I think, helped spread the word about anyone could enter. The topic was women in the workforce, and we ended up having, I think, like 80 entrants. So a lot of young people are interested in the topic, and a lot of young people actually wanted to win the grand prize, which was an iPad. It's pretty cool. Amy came to the 31st National Women's Conference in Sapporo. She got to meet some of the American speakers that were there. So Amy, thank you for participating in that topic. I won't put Amy on the stage with me, but I wanted to mention that in the future, we're going to have more contests. The next one will be probably more focused just on English, because that's another topic that the consulate wants to promote. You guys learning English. It's really, that also is important for Japan's future. Speaking of English, is my English okay? Too fast? Good. Not too fast? So at the consulate, we focus on a number of issues, but my section focuses on issues that are important to the Japanese. We want to add to the discussion. Prime Minister Abe is talking about the role of women in the workforce a lot. He's talking about global genocide. Japan is trying to figure out how it can harness some of this energy that is driving global businesses, global economic growth, which is entrepreneurship, starting new businesses. Japan is pretty low on the scale. So the consulate brings speakers over to this women's conference that was in Sapporo this year. Every year it's a different city. We brought 2 Americans in to talk about how Americans experience this issue in America. All right, so what I say about what we're doing in America might be applicable to you, but I also want to say at the outset that America is not the best example for countries that are giving women the best opportunities. The United States is still struggling with this issue, but we're making progress. So I'll share a number of statistics, a number of examples. You can stop me anytime that you want to. As I said, I've prepared a formal speech. I'm going to make it pretty casual. So in the United States, women earned the right to vote in 1920. It was a long time ago. But from 1920 into the 1970s, women experienced a lot of difficulty. In the 1970s, we had a civil rights movement in the United States. You guys learn about the civil rights movement in the United States? It was especially popular or famous for African American rights. Dr. Martin Luther King. There were a lot of protests, but women also were demanding their equal rights in the 1970s because they were treated as second-class citizens. So after the 70s, a lot of change happened. And I'm going to share an example of my organization, the State Department, kind of show you the history, and it's somewhat reflective of society at large, and how the United States has evolved and continues to evolve. So again, this presentation is not just for women. This is an issue that concerns everyone. Boys, girls, men, husbands, wives, grandpas, grandmas, because Japan has these long-held gender roles that are starting to break down, but it's hard to change a culture. And it requires cultural change to really have this movement really take hold and be most successful. So what are some of the other issues that are driving this? In Japan, you have an aging population, right? You have a shrinking population. As the workforce gets older and the workforce gets smaller, It puts a lot of economic pressure on people. What are you going to do? You're not going to have enough workers. You make more opportunities for women, and that's one way. In the United States, we don't have a shrinking population. Our population is still growing, but a lot of that is due to immigrants. And immigration is helping the United States still grow, but Japan's not alone with this shrinking population problem. Much of the developed world also has a shrinking population problem. In Europe, a lot of countries are choosing to look at immigration to stem their problem. But Japan is focused on this untapped talent, females who maybe have not entered the workforce, or they got jobs out of college like you, and then they got married, maybe had kids, took some time off, and it's not easy to come back into the workforce. Why else is it relevant to you? As I said, the world is changing really quickly. I mentioned that we bring over speakers to talk about entrepreneurship. Just last week I was in Tohoku with a man named Paul Berry. Does anyone know Huffington Post? You know Huffington Post? It's an online media. You can read it here in Japan, in the United States. It's incredibly popular. He was he wasn't a founder, but he got into Huffington Post really early. Huffington Post was bought out by $315 million. So this guy, he started or helped develop many companies. He's running his own company now. And his company is called Rebel Mouse. He has a cute little logo with a Rebel Mouse. And when I was in Tohoku with him, we went to Morioka and we went to Hachinohe and talked to groups of university students and people who want to start their own business. They want to find out, how can I start my own business? And his message was scary. It was scary because the workforce is changing so quickly, and it's hard to keep up, much less stay ahead. So his company, they provide online services to many of the most famous companies around. He had a PowerPoint slide that showed them, and it was Coca-Cola, and it was Yahoo, and Google. Anyway, he provides services, a lot of programming, a lot of internet, website services, and he's tapping into a workforce around the world. And his objective is to find the most talented people he can, and he doesn't care where they live. So he's got website developers in Egypt and other places in Africa, in Japan, in China, in India, and they all work from home. So he's never met most of them. They work different hours. The only thing that he's looking for are really smart people. And I think the other common denominator is they need to be able to communicate in English. So this is one example, and technology is a little bit separate from, working at the State Department. But this is a trend. And more, you guys are going to be competing with people around the world for jobs. In the United States, that's the way it is, especially in technology. But it's true in medicine, it's true in marketing. You don't have to work you don't have to live in the United States to work for a company in the United States. More and more of these jobs are becoming remote. So how are you going to keep up? I'll talk later about the importance of English, but that's a great skill that you guys should focus on. If you're listening and understanding to me now, you're already ahead of many of your peers. So I'm going to talk about three different sectors: the government sector, the business sector, and individuals, and how these three separate groups are all involved with this issue of a changing workforce. Both Japan and the United States are really lucky that we have strong leaders who understand the issue and the need to give women more options. In the United States, it's President Obama. And the first thing he did when he became president, the first law he passed was a law to make it illegal to pay a different wage. So the law was called the Lilly Ledbetter Fair Pay Act, which empowers women to fight pay discrimination in the workplace. So he passed a law to give women a legal right to challenge pay discrimination. Oftentimes women get paid less for the same job as men. It's not fair. Everyone knows it's not fair, but until you pass a law, women have a hard time challenging it. So that was the first thing President Obama did. He also grew up in a single parent household. Right? His mom, he was raised by his mom. His mom had to get a job to support the family. So, he appreciates the value of working women. He understands the hardship of being raised in a family with a single parent who was working. So it's important to him. Prime Minister Abe also is paying a lot of attention to this issue. Again, he understands this dynamic of aging workforce, shrinking workforce. How is Japan going to solve it? There's a lot of unused talent right here that he wants to tap into, which is women. Women need to have more opportunities. And he has a very ambitious agenda in the security, energy, and economic arenas, Abenomics. And all of it is really dependent on this plan for women and the role that women need to play to support Abenomics. Here's one of the first statistics I'm going to share with you. The World Economic Forum reported that Japan ranked 105th, 105, out of 136 countries in this global gender gap report. So, out of 136 countries, Japan is number 105. It means it's way at the bottom. And some of those countries down there are known for blatant discrimination policies against women. So Japan has a lot of potential. It can grow a lot. Some other studies show that if Japan taps into this talent, better uses women, its GDP, its economy can grow by 16%. The economy is growing by 16%, that means all of you guys have jobs. Right now, Japan officially slipped into a recession. It means the economy is not very strong. By giving women more opportunities, the economy can grow by 16%. So, Prime Minister Abe has really brought this issue to the fore. There's a lot of debate about it. Right? He had a big international symposium in Tokyo this summer. He brought a lot of famous people, very experts on the topic, to Tokyo to talk about it, to talk about a plan. There's a debate, which is really good in a democracy. You should always talk about these things. And it's not enough for Prime Minister Abe to have a plan. Everyone needs to understand the plan, and everyone needs to be willing to be a part of that plan. So, in the State Department, I mentioned President Obama. My previous boss was Hillary Clinton. My current boss's boss's boss is John Kerry. And all of them have made women's empowerment a primary focus for the State Department. I work for the State Department. All diplomats work for the State Department. This is one of the key issues for us around the world. So it's not just Japan. Many and indeed most countries are grappling with this issue. And for a long time, the State Department wasn't a credible voice on this issue. The State Department used to be called an old boys club, and it was almost all white men like me. And it was hard to talk about this issue many years ago, talking about you need to give women more opportunities, right? When indeed the department that's talking about this issue is a bunch of white guys. So President Obama, Secretary Clinton, and now John Kerry have brought unprecedented focus on promoting gender equality and advancing the status of women and girls around the world. And starting in the 1970s, back with the civil rights movement and the women's rights movement, the State Department started making some changes. And because the State Department needs to reflect not just American values, but American society. And probably close to 50% women, right? Well, the State Department should also probably be pretty close to 50% women. There are a lot of ethnic minorities in the United States. African Americans, Mexican Americans, Asian Americans. There's a lot of other kinds of minorities. There's handicapped people. There are, do you know the acronym LGBT? Lesbians, gays, bisexuals, and transgender people. So the State Department became much more inclusive. We accepted a lot more people so that the State Department would reflect the United States. And let me run through this pretty quickly. In 1804, the State Department was formed, hired its first woman. They put her probably in a basement, and her job was to put together papers to make books. Right? So hey, 210 years ago, the first woman was employed, but she wasn't given any responsibility. In 1921, so flash 117 years ahead, the first woman took the exam that I had to take to become a diplomat. First time, 1921. So this was 1 year after the women finally earned the right to vote in the United States. In from 1925 to the end of World War II, 1945, there were only 6 female diplomats in the State Department. And the reason that the State Department refused to hire women were pretty incredible. Today, we'd say they were ridiculous, but at that time, these were held up as legitimate reasons to not hire women. Anyone want to guess what they were? Women can't keep a secret. Can we keep a secret? The thought was that women were worse at keeping secrets than men. And this was in 1909. That was one of the reasons that, hey, you can't have women diplomats. The women run a bigger risk of being compromised by male officials. So maybe women will be seduced and manipulated. Women will have a hard time working in Islamic countries where they don't give their own women enough opportunities. And that foreign ministries won't take a woman seriously. And these were all the reasons that they didn't give women jobs. Well, in the 1970s, women started demanding that they be treated fairly. Also, in the 1970s, I'm married, so if this is 1970, my wife would have been expected to volunteer, basically a full-time volunteer, to host parties for me, to look pretty, to be my assistant. That would be her job. She didn't get paid for it. But in the 1970s, all these wives came together and said, look, this isn't fair. And they probably threatened a lawsuit. And the State Department said, okay, you're right, it's not fair. And then also, until the 1970s, in the State Department, women would name, so there were some female officers, not many, I shared those numbers. When they did get married, they had to quit their job. Right? Sometimes in Japan, I think that's still the case. Women challenged that and said, this is discrimination. This is not fair. Men don't have to quit their job. Why do women have to quit their job? And they sued. They brought a lawsuit against the Department of State, and they won. And then finally, in like 1974, the State Department said, yes, we're wrong, and all those people that we fired before 1974, you can come back and work for the State Department. So through force and threats of many lawsuits and a lot of expense for the State Department finally started to change. Well, today, as I said, the State Department is much more representative of America. Does anyone know who the ambassador, the United States ambassador to Japan is? In Tokyo, who is the U.S. ambassador? She's a really famous person. I think I'll give you her first name. Caroline. Caroline Kennedy? President Kennedy's daughter. You never heard of her? She's been in the news a lot. She became the first woman American ambassador to Japan last year. For the first time. In 1997, so 17 years ago, we had the first Secretary of State, the top person in my business. Her name was Madeleine Albright, and then came Condoleezza Rice, and then Hillary Clinton. So they've had three people at the foreign ministry level since 1997. So things are changing really quickly. Another reason that the State Department and most companies now give more opportunities to women is because they value diversity. Diversity is used a lot in the United States. If you want to go to an American university, American universities are looking for a diverse student population. Otaru University of Commerce too, that's why there are international students here, right? By having a mixed group of people, the organization is much better. And they've done a lot of studies on this, and a diverse organization, they have found, makes better decisions. It's more efficient. It saves organizations money. And diversity of thought is valued because it allows more ingenuity and more creativity. So just a bunch of guys sitting in a room, or just a bunch of women sitting in a room, efficient, and it's not as creative, and it's not as effective. But you mix them, and you come up with new ideas and better ways to approach problems. Companies understand that now. Here's some more statistics that show how the United States is changing. In 1970, the rate of women working in society was, what was it, 43%. Okay, so 43% of women had a job. In 2009, it jumped up pretty substantially to 59%. And today, women and men are basically at the same level. Now, it doesn't mean that they all rise to the same degree, but just getting a job, women and men are at the same level. Also, the number of women at universities now is much higher than men, especially the number of students finishing their degrees. For every 5 students graduating, 3 are women. That's 3. 3 are women. 3 to 2. And the graduate degrees, also, many programs have a lot more women than men. So in Japan, here's how the numbers shake out. In 1970, there were 48% of women in the labor force. Let's see, I said, and so in 1970, the United States was 43%, Japan was 48%. Japan's actually ahead of the United States in 1970. In 2009, the United States jumped up to 59%, and Japan did what? Moved up to 48%. It stayed the same. And I don't have a more recent statistic, but actually from 1970 to 2009, it backs a little less than 1%. So there's room for improvement. So one of the problems in Japan is the famous M-shaped labor participation, where women leave the workforce after they get married or have kids, and then they have a really hard time getting back. Why do they have a hard time getting back into the labor force? Well, oftentimes, Japanese businesses or government is inflexible. Many women don't want to come back and work full time, right? Who's going to raise the kids? Who's going to take care of the older parent? Right? The expectation is still that the man is going to do that. So there's not a whole lot of support. So some of the problems that the Prime Minister and others have pointed out are insufficient child care and nursing care support, a tax system that discourages women's return to work, and a rigid immigration law that prevents foreigners coming in to provide some of the services that Americans use. So in America, a lot of men and women, husbands and wives, are out working, and they need help. Well, when I was in the States, it was pretty easy. My wife and I both used to work full time. Come home and we're tired and it's late. But if we just paid a little bit of money, we could have someone clean the house for us. You could have someone cut your grass and fix your garden. You could have someone babysit the kids. Or if you're more wealthy, you have enough money or the need, you can hire a full-time nanny that can look after your kids full-time. And this is what Americans have to do, but this kind of support is much harder to find in Japan. My wife and I, we want to hire a babysitter, but Japan doesn't have so much of a babysitting culture. It's a great job for American high school students, American university students. They can go and they can babysit after school at night. When I was living in Washington, D.C., I had to pay $20 an hour for a babysitter, Nissan, more than Nissan now, for someone to come and basically watch TV at night while my kids were sleeping. Like, hey, that's a pretty good job. So in the United States, as more women have demanded their right to enter the workforce, and more companies have learned the value of women. Companies are changing. And it's not just that more laws have been passed saying, you must hire more women. Companies, again, as I said, they have learned to value diversity, and they want a more flexible workforce. And there's been so many changes in my lifetime. So what are some of these changes? Does anyone know what flex time is? Right. Usually in a company, you'll go and work from 9 to 5. Well, what if your kid is in preschool or school gets out at 3:30? 9 to 5 schedule isn't flexible, and you have to find someone to watch the kid, or the kid has to stay at school. So they've come up with different ways. It's not so surprising to you, but they're all actually pretty recent changes. Maybe you don't work 9 to 5. Maybe you work 7 to 3, or 10 to 6. Teleworking. Not enough companies utilize the internet or the telephone, right? Today, you don't have to be in an office much of the time to do your work. I can sit in my office and I can make a PowerPoint presentation, or I can sit at home and make a PowerPoint presentation, and it really doesn't make any difference. So why don't more companies and business governments, organizations allow people to stay at home and do that? Good question. Another option that I would love is working 40 hours a week, but in 4 days instead of 5. So instead of 5 8-hour days, why not work 4 10-hour days? And then you get Friday, Saturday, Sunday off. You get a longer weekend. Well, a lot of studies show that people are actually more productive. Businesses are like, oh no, it's kind of scary. Maybe the productivity will go down because they're off playing too much on the weekend. Well, actually, a lot of studies show that people are more productive. They work really hard, it's 10 hours, and then they are refreshed after 3 days weekend. Something else that is gaining popularity in the United States is on-site daycare, right? Where at Google, they have daycare right there. So the mother or father can drive to work, drop off the kid right there, go up to work. During lunchtime, they can go downstairs and play with the kid. It's a nice compromise. Many women and men feel bad about putting their 1-year-old kid in daycare and not seeing them all day. So if there's daycare at work, it's easier, right? Even a 15-minute break, you can run down and say hi, and you feel that connection. This is becoming a more popular option. Why? Because companies understand that it makes for a happier workforce, and it makes for a more productive workforce. And more importantly, some other companies are doing it, and to be competitive, they have to do the same. So these are called perks, extra benefits. In the IT world, I don't know if these stories are so famous in Japan, but in the United States, if you're working at Google, they have a big campus. Not only do they have daycare there, they have gyms there, they have laundry service there, they give you free food. You don't have to leave. In fact, they probably have hotels there too, you can spend the night. They want to make life as easy as possible for their employees. They want to try to boost morale and boost productivity. Give them reason, make it easier for them to stay there and work. So these are all techniques that are being used in the United States because it's better for the business, right? And I think this is a really important point. They don't do it because they're benevolent. Businesses, what's their main job? to be efficient and make money, right? Especially if you're a public company, you're on the stock exchange, you have a fiduciary duty. You have a responsibility to get as much, to make as higher profits as possible. Well, businesses wouldn't give all of these nice little perks to people, women and men at work, if it just cost them money, if there was no return. The return is higher than the cost. Pretty simple business. Any business majors? Anyone studying business? Yeah, good. That makes sense, right?
Yeah.
Spend more money, but the return, the profit is higher. That's what businesses do. Okay. So, you guys know the phrase work-life balance? Work-life balance? Work-life balance. It's nice to have balance in your life. If you're only working, you got no time for a life, no time for anything else. If you don't have a job, then you only have free time, but you have no money to enjoy yourself either, right? But you want to find a balance. That balance is not the same for everyone. Some people really like working, and they're really ambitious, and they want to get ahead. And they're okay with more work and less free time, less life. Other people want to work part-time and, raising their family or raising their kids or taking care of their sick mother or father is important to them. So finding that balance requires having options. And this is a struggle in the United States. It used to be, when I was growing up, fathers were expected to go to work. Mothers were pretty much expected to take care of the home. Does that sound familiar? That's still kind of the norm in Japan? Maybe? That was the stereotype and that was the expectation in my lifetime. But when I was growing up, things started to change. Actually now, more women want to work, but also families need women to work because one salary oftentimes isn't enough. You don't make enough money. And the wife also has to work, but more importantly, she wants to work. So, in the United States too, trying to find this balance is difficult. When I was growing up, when I was in elementary school, my family used to have a chore wheel. You know what chores are? Chore is housework. Anyone tell me an example of a chore?
Chore.
Huh? Doing laundry?
Wash the dishes.
Wash the dishes?
Cleaning the room.
Clean your room? Feed the dog? Take out the garbage? Mow the lawn? All these things. So, on our refrigerator at home, my mom and dad taped a little piece of paper. And on it, I had 2 older brothers and a younger sister and me, 4 of us. So there was a pie, a circle, cut into 4, and all those jobs were put on this chart. And in the middle were our names. Ted, Tammy, Dan, Tom, and our names would change every week. And we would get a new set of chores, right? So maybe this week I have to feed the dog and do the dishes. I'm 7 years old. This is my job, okay? But next week I have to mow the lawn and bring in firewood, something like that, right? Every day I was expected to help around the house. Well, my mom was a teacher. My father was a teacher. They couldn't do all the work, but they also said their expectation was that kids need to participate. And I hated that chore wheel. I really didn't like washing the dishes. I still don't like washing dishes. In America, we had a dishwasher. in Japan, I don't have a dishwasher, so I still have to wash dishes. And I remember being a kid in the chore wheel and having to wash dishes. But I learned a lot. And that, though I really didn't like the chore wheel, it taught me as a young boy that men and women, boys and girls, can do the same work and should do the same work. So as a husband and as a father, I come home from work and I help. When my wife is working, I help a lot more. I do the dishes. I don't like doing the dishes. I do the dishes. I help with the laundry. I take out the garbage. I brush the dog. Right? But it makes sense. My wife is working, I'm working, why should she have to do all of the housework? But I grew up with that expectation that that's what boys do, and that's what men do. And like I said, my father, when he was growing up, that wasn't necessarily the case. That generation was different. The roles that men played were different. Back then, a man's role was to bring home the bacon, to make the money, and provide financial support to the family. Now, most men are expected to have a job and to help around the house. And that was a culture shift. Changing the expectations and the roles of men and women, that's big stuff. And it takes a long time, and it takes a long time to really understand exactly what you should do. Japan, I think, is going through that, or will be going through that to a greater degree. So in the United States now, women make 45% of the family income. 45%. So maybe some women are not working full-time or whatever, but they're making almost half of the family income. But they're still doing more than half of the chores, the household work. And a lot of women are not happy about that, right? It's not fair, but it's hard to change. It's still changing, expectations are changing, but women are now making a lot more money quickly compared to before, but the number of household duties that they have is decreasing more slowly. And here's an interesting statistic. Almost 1/4, 1 out of 4 women make more than 10%, make 10% or more money than their husbands. 1/4 of the women in the United States now make a lot more money than their husbands. That's a lot of women. Makes sense. I'm sure in not too long it'll probably be 50%. There's no reason. And my wife has a really good degree. She used to make more money than I did. And, when she was working full-time, I was doing more consulting work, and I had to do a lot more housework to support her career. She does consulting work now, working flexible hours, and I have the full-time job. And she's stuck doing more of the household work. But you know what? We both help each other, and that is what's important, is the teamwork. And families really break down when both the husband and the wife aren't cooperating on these things. So as I said at the beginning, there are a couple other things I want to talk about. One is entrepreneurship, and the other is study abroad. And these are two other topics that my office, my consulate, spends a lot of time on. It's issues that are important in Japan, and we want to share an American perspective. So Prime Minister Abe talks a lot about global jinsai. What is it, global jinsai? Are you a global jinsai? Will you become a global jinsai? Can anyone define what that is? Global human resources. Maybe it's not perfectly defined, but it's a word that I think you've all heard before. And the Prime Minister is pushing for more global human resources, people with international experience, people with an understanding of different cultures, different people who can operate in both Japan and a foreign country, or operate in Japan with foreigners that are coming here. This is a big priority for Japan. We got a lot of changes ahead of Japan. The Olympics are coming. 2020, there are going to be a lot of foreigners coming. Right now in Hokkaido, there are a lot of foreigners. And the tourism industry in Hokkaido is really dependent on foreigners. It's especially true in Niseko, but we talked about how the economy is weak. One of the ways that Hokkaido is growing is they're attracting more foreigners, more Chinese, more people from Southeast Asia, more Australians, not enough Americans. But you need people who speak English, speak Chinese, who understand maybe that a foreigner actually, when they stay in a hotel, might want a different experience. How their food might be different, or that, if Japan doesn't have any hospitals where people can speak a foreign language, it's going to be hard. And maybe foreigners won't want to come because it's scary, right? So these are global jinsai. And in this digital age, it's more important than ever that we all be global jinsai, because the internet is flattening the world. I don't know if you know that term. It comes from Thomas Friedman. It's leveling the world and making a more level playing field. We talked about how you can work for someone in a foreign country, and you can work flexible hours. The internet is changing the world, and how are we going to keep up? Still, I wonder how many of you, when you graduate, want to work for a big Japanese company for a lifetime. Maybe many of your parents did that, right? You graduate from college, you go work for Mitsubishi or something, and that's where you stay your whole life. Maybe Mitsubishi will move you around, but you're working for the same company, and then you retire, and you get that pension, Nenkin. Life's good. Well, those jobs in Japan are harder to get, right? In the United States, they're also really hard to get. In fact, most of the jobs in the United States and much of the world are coming from businesses. Let me speak to the United States. The majority of the jobs created in the last 30 years, the vast majority, almost all of the new jobs in the last 30 years are coming from companies that were created maybe after you were born. So those companies that have been around for 100 years, they're not hiring nearly as many people as Amazon, as Yahoo, as Google, as Facebook, as Twitter. When I was your age, none of those companies existed. But now they're providing the best jobs in America. Really good salaries, a lot of those special things, you know, the laundry service and on-site daycare. In America, more and more young people are aspiring to those new companies rather than the old traditional jobs. In Japan, how is that going to change? I don't know. But SoftBank, it's been around for a while, but it hasn't been big until pretty recently. That's a big employer, am I right? You guys all use the internet? Of course you do, right? You can't live without the internet. Well, the internet is making it so easy to start your own business. And a lot of people now are thinking about starting their own business. It's not uncommon. As I said, last week I was in Tohoku with a guy who, we brought him over to share with Japanese about how he did it. And to make audiences aware that it's not impossible. It's not impossible in Japan, although Japan is falling behind. In fact, it was dead last in the industrialized countries for producing new businesses. So in the United States, I shared all the jobs, almost all the jobs are coming from new businesses. In Japan, amongst all the top industrialized countries, Japan is at the bottom. Entrepreneurship hasn't taken hold here, and it could. You guys are all smart people. Japan is known for Kaizen. Take an idea, change a little bit, and build on it. But yeah, I'm sure that's going to change at some point. Probably you guys can be young entrepreneurs and start your own business. All you really need is an internet connection and a really good idea, and maybe a little bit of money. But it's not so expensive. Has anyone heard of Etsy? E-T-S-Y, company name. Those of you who have your smartphones out, you can go to Etsy, etsy.com. It's a new business, and it is booming around the world, and it provides incredible opportunities for small companies, entrepreneurs, to make something and to sell it. So last month was Halloween, right? My daughter, you know what she wanted to be, what her costume for Halloween was? She wanted to be Totoro. So where do I find a Totoro costume for my 5-year-old daughter? I went to the internet and I looked. And I went to Etsy, and Etsy had a Totoro costume. Well, it wasn't made by a famous company. It was made by a small company, a woman